if we can make, I always think if I can make people just forget about the troubles of this world and just spend some time with their family, making memories, seeing some really cool animals, and learning about, the earth and the importance of clean water and how it affects everybody, especially the animals that depend on it to survive, and then we win.
Absolutely.
Hey there, Podcast Aquanauts. It's your host, Casey here. If we're doing our job well here at the aquarium, and this is one aspect of who we are that I think we are inarguably good at, you shouldn't be aware of the work that we're going to discuss in this episode. Designing exhibits at a zoo or an aquarium is a little like constructing tiny worlds. You'll often hear me and other guests on the show refer to where our animals live as habitats, and that's more than just lip service or empty words. These are, in fact, where our residents live and, thus, can be defined as their habitat, but in a broader sense, they're designed with a great deal of attention to detail and intention to replicate as closely as possible the natural spaces in which these species can be found in the wild. They can feel immersive, whisking you away to places far afield and exotic or, in some cases, close to home and heart. In this episode, I've invited two members of our staff into the studio dive cage who are intimately involved in the design of our habitats. As you'll soon hear, the discussions that take place throughout the design process, from artistic concepts and modeling to the actual construction, touch on not just the quality of life of an exhibit's future residents, but also on how they'll be experienced by visitors to the aquarium. This is important, if often invisible work, and I think it's high time to draw aside the curtain to let more people appreciate all the thought that goes into the creation of an exhibit that transforms it into a window to another place. So, let's get to it, shall we? On with the podcast. Hello, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Podcast Aquatic, the official podcast of the Tennessee Aquarium. I am here with with one returning guest and one new guest to the show. And today I thought we would talk about how exhibits come into existence. So there's a process that goes on, a pretty long and detailed one that we will get into. But before we do that, let me go ahead and work my way around a different table. The Podcast Aquatic's home, the studio dive cage, is on the road today. We're actually in the office of one of our guests. So this is Thom Demas. Thom, you were on the first episode of the Podcast Aquatic, our episode talking about sharks.
I was, and it was a lot of fun, and I'm happy to be back.
Well, thank you for being back. And your title is Vice President and Chief Husbandry and Exhibits Officer. Is that right?
That's right.
I just had to write it first for you. It's the only reason I have it stuck in my brain. And new to the show, we've got Jeff. Jeff Worley, you are our Senior Manager of Exhibit Services.
Close enough.
What is it? No, give me the actual title. The people want to know.
Director of Graphics, or Director of Exhibits and Graphics.
Okay, so not at all close then.
Well,
it was the previous title. It was close enough.
Yeah.
All right.
And Casey, I must say you look marvelous today.
I look like I have been run under a faucet because, as you can probably hear, well, maybe you can hear, I don't know, it's just pelting down rain right now in Chattanooga. And if you hear it there, it sounds like there's a pipe running through the middle of your office, Thom, that it's just, it's audible.
That's why they put me in here. I'm deaf in one ear, so it's not a bother for me.
Will that be a problem for the podcast, though? Will you be able to hear us?
What? Yeah, no, it won't be a problem.
All right. So as promised, today's episode is going to talk about our process for thinking through, concepting, and then ultimately building exhibits, the kinds of things that we think about. And let's just work our way around the table. Jeff, when it comes to design an exhibit, at what point do you become involved, and what is your role when that happens?
Well, I think I get involved pretty early on in the process, and I'm a member of the exhibit steering committee, and staff and other folks on the committee. They think about what new exhibits would be exciting for our guests, and we kick around lots of ideas. We pull together a team to explore some of the ideas a little further. Many times, an aquarist or somebody in our husbandry department will have a great idea, and they'll prepare a presentation and bring it to exhibit steering, and they'll show everybody, what they have in mind, and we kick it around and we think, does this thing have some, merit, and would it excite our guests, and we go from there.
Couple of examples of that I can think of offhand. In the Rivers of the World gallery, I'm fairly certain that our senior aquarist, Kimberly, brought the idea of the Copawis River exhibit to the steering committee. Can you talk a little bit about how she presented that and the the process by which we brought that to life?
Sure. We had an old exhibit that was showing its age.
Nishiki Goi, I think. Right?
Nishiki Goi. And Kimberly had put together a presentation about the Copawis River, which is in Borneo, I think.
Mm-hmm.
It is.
And,
Correct. Correct.
And she presented it, gave us some examples of some of the animals that we could have on exhibit. Everybody got excited about it, and so we just made it happen and went in there. While we took the exhibit down, we did some repair work, some rock work, some painting. They themed it somewhat, and then new graphics, and then we opened up a new exhibit.
Now, there will be lingo that comes up in this conversation that maybe I might have to rewind a little bit so that we can explain it to people. So when you say rock work, what does that mean exactly?
Well, many of our exhibits have rocks in there or backdrops or themes. We call them inserts, and they make the exhibits look more natural, like a habitat for the animals to live in. And we try to make it as close to their natural habitat as possible.
I could easily see following this path, continuing down this path. But before I do, I want to loop Thom into this. So Thom, at what point are you involved in the conversations and the decision-making process for exhibits? I mean, your title suggests that you are there from the ground floor.
Yeah, I've been in this current position I'm in for a couple of years, and I feel really fortunate that Jeff and his team work with me and the husbandry side. Historically, I was an aquarist, and Jeff is someone I've worked very well with for many years, and I'm not the most creative, but I am fairly creative, and Jeff is incredibly creative. So we've had a real synergy over the years. So in our current relationship, this works really, really well. When do I get involved? Usually the person in husbandry puts together some crazy idea of, hey, I want to do something new, and this is what I want to do. I'm usually looped in pretty early that there's an idea brewing. I also am on the exhibit steering committee, so I'm in that meeting when it comes to fruition. And because of my background working with the animals, a lot of times I'm involved in the decision of whether or not can we really do this animal. We would not suggest an exhibit of an animal we haven't proven.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what are the things you think about when you're deciding yes or no based on this will work or this won't work?
Yeah, so, for example, the Portuguese man-o'-war. As you know, we've been working on that off and on over the years, and we've had some success keeping them. We have a little problem we can't figure out. There's a parasite issue with them that we haven't been able to crack the nut and really make them something we can really count on thriving. So that project is a little bit on hold, but that's a good example. If someone proposed, hey, I want to do a Portuguese man-o'-war exhibit, well, we got to find out, are any of our colleagues displaying them? And if they're not, why not? And how could we display them?
And in that particular case, I think the answer is no. No one is actually displaying Portuguese man-o'-war, correct?
That's my understanding currently. I was very on top of this a couple of years ago, and at that point, absolutely nobody was worldwide. And as far as I know, that has not changed. But that would be an example if someone proposed an animal that wasn't suited or wasn't proven to be able to be cared for properly.
And the reason for that, but we'll keep going down the path of exhibit design, but in that particular case, since it's a good test case for the no column,
right?
Why not? What is it about Portuguese man-o'-war? First of all, we should probably explain what a Portuguese man-o'-war is. I mean, people probably think of them as like jellyfish, but they're not really jellyfish.
No,
right?
They're a commensal organism made up of 4 different organisms. I'm not enough of a geneticist to really explain how this works. Somehow all 4 organisms reproduce together and grow up together. But the sail is an organism, the reproductive system is an organism, the feeding tentacles and system are an organism, and the digestive tract is a separate organism. And somehow they reproduce asexually, and when they grow up, they somehow they stay together and form this colonial animal. A geneticist goes in and can tell you genetically why they're different. I can't look and explain it to you. But so why is it not a good choice? We, as an AZA accredited organization, we have what's called an institutional collection plan. And we go through the institutional collection plan, and it asks all these questions. For example, how is it relevant to your mission? Can you acquire the animal? How easy is it to care for? How hard is it to get or expensive to get? Can you provide the proper food? There's all these things you go through. Yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And when you get to the end of that, it kind of breaks out a little formula and tells you, is this a good animal for exhibit? In the example of the Portuguese man of war, it checks all the positive marks in terms of it meets our mission, it'd be great for guests to see, it'd be exciting. Where it doesn't check the mark is, can you give them good welfare? And the answer is we don't know, because nobody's kept them before.
There's no precedent.
Correct.
Okay.
So in the case of, how we evaluate, is this a good idea for exhibit, making sure we can do what's right by the animal and provide top level animal care, and so that animal has good well-being, that is absolutely number one. And that's one reason so many of us stick around here. The Tennessee Aquarium upholds those tenets. If we have a problem and we can't do what's right for the animal, we don't do it. And if it's expensive, then we spend the money and we do it. We always do what's best for the animal. So that's a big thing when it comes to making a decision. Could we do blue whales? We probably could, but we don't have a tank big enough. And then what about the migratory patterns? You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So it's just, there's a lot that goes in it based on natural history.
Jeff, explain what exactly your day-to-day involves. Because exhibits is in both of your titles, but what exactly what is your area of expertise and authority when it comes to the aquarium?
Jack of all trades, master of none would be my take on that.
Yeah.
Master of all, really.
You do an awful lot. We're making fun, but you do an awful lot.
He does.
Graphic design is my background. And then it kind of evolved into exhibit design while I was here at the aquarium. And so, we're constantly looking at the visitor experience and how we can make it better. We've started to incorporate a lot more interactives in our galleries. And I've got a great team member, Joey Turnipseed, who is our exhibits technology specialist. He creates and builds all kinds of crazy things and programs them. And
3D print stuff.
3D print stuff, CNC routes, things, builds prototypes. But yeah, day to day, it's whatever particular project that we're working on consumes my time mostly. Yeah. And then, we put out fires at, every day that something's happening here on this exhibit or that exhibit.
Yeah, like we're talking, like what we're talking about today would be more of like the big stuff, right? Like the actual changes of the exhibits because the aquarium is, even if you're a member and you come back, the likelihood is if it's been more than 4 to 6 months, you're probably going to see something new, some new exhibit, even if it's something small. Recently, we opened a freshwater mussels exhibit in our Register Rivers gallery. That's a new addition. We're moving some things around, so things will be in different places. Some animals that have been in one exhibit might be in a larger exhibit the next time you see them. A good example of that would be our electric eel. Our electric eel, when I first came here, is where our freshwater pipefish currently are in the Rivers of the World Gallery. We moved that animal into a much larger exhibit. Can you talk a little bit about why we would make decisions like that? And I guess maybe this is more of a Thom question, but as you think of things to add to this, Jeff, please sound off.
Yeah, that's a two-pronged answer. One, we never want an animal in an exhibit that doesn't provide the necessary space for that animal to thrive. So if the exhibit were too small, we would move that electric eel. In the case of what happened with this electric eel, it was perceived too small by some guests. And I see why they would think that. Knowing the life history of the eel, and how they behave and what they do, the eel was doing great. but we felt that if folks were getting upset about it, clearly their perception is their reality.
Let's say perception is reality.
Yeah,
Yep.
and we strive to give the best care, but if a significant number of people walking through getting that feeling, then I don't want that to happen. So in the case of this electric eel move you mentioned, it was because a few folks felt like the tank wasn't big enough, and we saw some feedback from our guests. And it's not about who's right. If they felt like it wasn't big enough, at the end of the day, it wasn't big enough. So that's why we moved the animal.
So sometimes it's animal care, sometimes it's because we want to refresh a gallery, add some new experiences for people. And Jeff, you like I said, we're talking today about more of the larger things, the exhibit changes, but you also do refreshes to individual exhibits, so signage, things like that.
Yeah, we're constantly looking to update graphics, make them current. They're constantly starting to fade and show their age. So we try to update those.
You just added the video to the stream.
We've been adding videos, to several of our exhibits. And I love to add a video monitor that displays behavior that the guests are not going to normally see on exhibit. And sometimes they do, like in the case of the new stream exhibit, our chubs are building nests. Mm-hmm. And when they do it and you can see it, it's fantastic. And now we have a monitor that shows that for our guests all year round.
And then the other example of that, I guess, would be the Freshwater Mussels exhibit now has footage from Hidden Rivers, which is a film by Freshwaters Illustrated. They come up not infrequently on this show because we're all big fans of Freshwaters Illustrated, showing mussels doing behaviors that in all likelihood you would just not see when you're coming to the exhibit, but which are exceptional and really demonstrate the interesting ways that they interact with their ecosystem.
It really is. And it's unbelievable video footage that they've captured. And I would bet that most of your guests or most of our listeners have no idea that a mussel lures in the way that it does to spread its eggs.
Yeah. They lure the fish in, they grab the fish, and then they express onto the fish the young mussels.
Express is just one of those euphemisms that I don't think really does it justice. They spew out their larvae.
and so now these things are stuck all over the head and in the gills of the fish, and I'm sure it's irritating to the fish, but it's not life-threatening to the fish.
It sounds monstrous.
And it does sound monstrous. None of us would want to go through this. And then so the fish swims away, and as these larvae mature, they drop off the fish and settle in the substrate, and that's how the mussels disperse themselves through the stream. It's a fantastic strategy to move up and down the stream generationally. So what you're talking about, Jeff, is this lure that looks like maybe something that little fish might want to eat, or looks like a mate for that fish, or so the fish swims up to the mussel and it grabs it. It's fantastic. So Jeff doesn't give himself enough credit. He thinks of these things and he puts these monitors up. And I also should point out that Tennessee Aquarium does things. We're not the only one, but many facilities will hire a company to bring in a new exhibit. Tennessee Aquarium, we often develop those on our own, and the process Jeff described earlier. But then when it comes to replacing an entire gallery, an entire exhibit like the one we have coming up, our old Boneless Beauties gallery is a little long in the tooth and ready to be refreshed, so we're putting in a new theme there. Not only did one of our staff come up with the theme and some of our staff designing the LSS and the filtration and all that, figuring out the species.
LSS, life support system.
Life support systems.
So piping.
Yes, exactly. Jeff and his team come up with all the finishes in the gallery. So when you walk in, we have in-house designers that design the experience you're having from top to bottom.
And that's not usual. That's not a typical occurrence at a zoo or aquarium.
There are some that do, but not all. Absolutely not all.
It sounds like a real resource, though.
It's a huge resource.
There are companies out there that do that for zoos and aquariums, and we've used them in the past as well. Mm-hmm. But when we have the opportunity to do something ourselves in-house, it's nice. We can make it exactly what we want it to be.
We've got an incredibly talented staff, and we've not taken on a project yet that we weren't able to tackle and do a good job of. So sometimes we need a little time to figure it out, but incredibly talented staff.
Well, and there's a missing third component, guest-wise, to this conversation. Our director of facilities and maintenance, who I was hoping was going to be able to make it for this episode, and I think he had other obligations. But facilities oftentimes work pretty closely with us when it comes to things like you're talking about, like the LSS, so piping the exhibit, making sure the water is moving in the proper way, and making sure that the filters, I guess, are functional and in the right spot and are easily accessible to the people who work those exhibits.
That's exactly right. Rodney often acts as our general contractor and will coordinate subs accordingly. Sometimes we'll hire an outside contractor who will run their subs. Rodney's the guy who makes sure they're getting the information, things are flowing both directions freely, communication.
The ringleader.
The ringleader. But then on other galleries, like in Island Life, when we did that, plumbing, electrical, much of that gets done by in-house staff.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We couldn't do what we do without them.
No.
I'm always getting in trouble with Rodney about making the tanks too big. I said, in the turtle exhibit, he got all over me because I measured the elevator, all right, the width and the depth of the elevator. So I want the tanks to be as big as we can make them.
Right.
If we can get it in the building, I think that's fantastic. So
right.
He said, make sure to fit in the elevator. So I measured the elevator. I didn't take into account the handrails in the elevator or the little plastic lens for the light up and down lights. And so
you got a stern talking to, I guess.
Yes, I did. And they started to roll this tank into the elevator, and it had like less than a half-inch clearance. And they ended up having to take the handrails off. They had to take the light out so it would clear the plastic lens on the light. He got in, and after, we got it up there, and afterward he said, would it have just killed you to made the thing 6 inches smaller? I'm like, all right.
It feels like from looking from the outside in, because I'm usually brought in fairly late into the conversation, or historically I have been. I guess now I'm on the exhibit steering committee, so I see a little bit more of the sausage making process than I used to. But it just feels like your job is in large part problem solving. Like a lot of your job is not just being creative artistically, but you just have to solve problems.
I think that's a big part of it. Because we take on we try to think, how's the visitor going to engage with this exhibit? What's traffic flow going to be like? So I got to be thinking about those potential problems before we build it. And then, I consult with husbandry. How much backup space do you need? And then I never give them enough. But it's so important to me that the visitor side, there's plenty of room to navigate through. We have crowded weekends and, strollers and wheelchairs and all of that stuff we have to take into account. And, on a weekend, we do 5,000 or 6,000 people in a day. I want them to have as good a time as during the week when there's, 1,000 people here.
Yeah. I was going to say, what Thom was talking through the things that are on the official AZA checklist when it comes to, can we do this? I guess what's on your checklist for what makes an exhibit work from your standpoint and the kinds of things that you want the guest experience to be? Because if Thom is here talking about it more from the animal's perspective and the animal care perspective, I brought you in because I feel like you're responsible for the experience that the people who are listening to this have when they come through the exhibits and they see them.
Yeah. I look at, is there something for everybody? Is there...
Meaning what?
Will adults be able to engage with our exhibits as well as children? Will people with, who are challenged with handicaps, are they going to have as good a time? And I just want everybody to enjoy their experience. We try to engage a variety of ways and using, your senses of touch, sight, sometimes smell. Sometimes you can smell the penguins. You wouldn't want to.
No, we put a lot of effort to prevent that, but they're ripe.
So a lot of considerations.
Lots of considerations.
Yeah, language is one.
Language is one, yeah. Yeah, we're working on some really new, exciting ideas for our new exhibit that will open in the spring of next year, and to be able to include other languages.
Yeah, we have a big, Latin population here in this part of the country, and we want to make sure we can try to do things that can be read in English or in Spanish.
Yeah, that's important, and I think the accessibility is one of the things that is most important. We are accredited through Culture City, which is a Birmingham-based organization that makes sure that places like us are accessible and enjoyable, even if you have, say, sensory challenges. So if you have autism or Down syndrome, something else that maybe might otherwise affect your experience. Things I never would have thought of before we got that accreditation. I would never have thought of things like the sound that the escalator makes, if it's audible, or if the lights are too bright or they flicker or things like that. So I'm guessing that has become also part of your consideration as you're designing exhibits as well.
It is, although, when we have a waterfall in the Cove Forest and you hear that waterfall sound, it is overwhelming and it is loud, but it is natural, and it puts you in a sense of place that can't be faked. And that was one reason in our big stream exhibit in Ridges to Rivers, we kept the top open so you can hear the water running over the rocks, filling the pools, and then dropping over and creating the stream, and you hear that water rushing, and there's nothing like it.
No, it feels like I think what you just said is one of the things that I love the most about the aquarium, and I loved it even before I started working here, is the sense that you are transported. I think I've told this story before, that when I first walked through the aquarium when I was 7 years old, when the aquarium first opened in '92. You're both looking at me like it makes you feel old. It makes me feel old to say that too. But I remember that I knew that books could tell stories and movies could tell stories and video games could tell stories. But I did not know that a building could tell a story until I visited here. And you go up the escalator and you're told that you're water vapor and you're turning into a raindrop and you're going to fall in the Appalachian Cove Forest. And then you're going to work your way all the way down, following that path of that water takes through all the environments that it touches, all the way down to the Gulf. And I remember that just being mind-blowing, that there was such a thing as a building that could tell a story. And a lot of that rests with you and people like you who are making sure that those exhibits are as realistic as possible, that we use real plants, that we have rock work that looks as realistic as possible. So I guess kudos to you 33 years later.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you said that, because telling the story, that is so important to me, because I think that if we can tell a story and people get engaged with the story that we're trying to tell, then that's something they're going to remember. I mean, in public speaking, if you can tell a story, people will get engaged with the story, and then they've connected with you. And I think it's very powerful.
And they tend to remember. And if you want people to be actionable, they have to remember what they experienced. Yeah. And the story helps cement that.
33 years later, I'm still thinking about it.
Yeah. And now you're here with us.
And I am. I'm very happy to be here. I did want to ask Jeff, you started here before Thom or me by a good bit. You were one of the first employees, right?
Well, yes.
Not in your current role, I guess, but...
Not in my current role. I started in '92, about a month before we opened.
Okay.
So I've been here 33 years on April 6th.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so what was... And you said you were initially hired as a graphic designer, or...
No, audiovisual technician.
Okay.
But I knew I had a graphic design background, and I knew that at some point the aquarium was going to need somebody that could do what I did. And so call it providence. So
you snuck in?
So I snuck in. And when the opportunities came up, everything was new at the beginning. So nothing really needed changes for the first couple of years. But when things started to need to be changed, I had the skill set to do that. And it just built and built and built. And
what was your first exhibit that you worked on that you would consider like your first project as... and not just from a graphic design standpoint, but the first one that you actually helped to design? Because I want to talk about your process, because I remember the first time I walked in your office and you had a model for, I believe it was the Tropical Cove refresh we did back in 2017, or that opened in 2017. I guess work started in 2016. And you had a model of lemur forest. And I remember seeing that model, and then a couple months later seeing the finished product. So I want to dig into your process later, but before I do, I want to know what the first gallery or first exhibit that you helped to create, start to finish.
Probably the first one was around 2012 when we did River Giants.
Okay.
I built that model of that tank. It's just a single tank, but it's like a 96,000 gallon tank. And so we redid the rock work, we rethemed it, and we went from our Gulf of Mexico exhibit to River Giants. And so that was probably the first one that I actually built a model to scale with rock work. And then we would send that off to the people that do the theming, and they would actually use it as a construction document because it was all to scale. And then they would do their drawings, and they would come in, and they would have my model sitting there as they were spraying the concrete in and sculpting it and everything.
Yeah, I've seen it on rolling carts that the construction crews were moving around Lemur Forest, and wondering, what in the world is that? And then I went and looked at it, and I was like, well, it's like looking into it like a dollhouse or something, like a dollhouse version of it. But my dream is to get a camera that is small enough that I can manipulate and do a little like fly through of the model, and then just fade into the actual real world finished version of it, because it's incredible how 1-to-1 it is. So you said you had a background in creative or in graphic design. What skills? I mean, how did you get the skill set to do the modeling? I mean, what are those two things just natural corollaries or dovetailed together, or
that was pure gifts from God? I don't know.
Jeff is very humble. He has a skill set that I don't know what the average graphic designer can do, because I've not been around that many, mostly Jeff. He can draw. He drew a sea turtle one year for an auction. It was phenomenal. He can draw architecturally. He can use AutoCAD. He can design the logo and how a business card should be laid out. He's the one who picks the colors and the finishes for the public spaces in our galleries. I think the IMAX remodel last year was your baby. So he's got a skill set that exceeds what the average graphic designer does, I believe.
Well, now I have a team that helps with that too. So
is that weird for you to have been? I mean, I don't want to say that you flew solo, but I mean, you were more directly involved, I guess, and on a smaller team previously, and to have more people working under you now?
Well, it is. We never officially had an exhibits department until the last, 3 or 4 years. And then Jackson would introduce me as, this is our exhibits department.
Our former chief operating officer, Jackson Andrews.
Yeah. And he would introduce me as, this is our exhibits department. And really, I was just a guy in the AV department at the time, but I was doing it.
The Tennessee Aquarium's Podcast Aquatic is made possible by support from the Tennessee Conservationist, the official magazine of Tennessee state parks. Each issue is filled with fascinating stories about Tennessee's native species, rich history, and unique culture. It's also your guide to exploring state parks and planning your next outdoor adventure. Subscribe today at tnconservationist.org. So since River Giants, have you been involved in all of the galleries since then?
Yeah, all the galleries since River Giants. Before River Giants, we would consult with other facilities. We would consult with the exhibit design firms, things like that. We worked together with the National Aquarium in Baltimore on our Jellies, Phantoms of the Deep. That was our first changing exhibit, but we worked with those folks. And
where was that one?
It was in the Ridges to Rivers Gallery.
Yeah.
Really? Okay.
That gallery is first called Discovery Hall.
What I think is so interesting about the aquarium and aquariums, I guess, in general, in a way that maybe isn't necessarily as true of zoos, is that we don't have the room to just sort of sprawl and just occupy more acreage. We have a very defined footprint, and short of doing a major expansion like we did in 2005 with Ocean Journey,
right?
What you got's what you got.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then in Ocean Journey, they thought ahead, and they had some expansion galleries that were kind of behind some walls.
Where penguins and island life are now.
Correct.
But Island Life was Jelly's Living Art first, and
we're throwing a lot of names out of it.
2009, Jelly's Living Art. Well, we worked with the Monterey Bay Aquarium on that exhibit, and they were very successful with it. And we just kind of adapted it into our floor plan. And
Put our spin on it. It was
Yeah.
a bit different than what they had done, but it was the same general concept.
So once you have, even with a defined footprint like this, or maybe because we have a defined footprint, once a gallery is in place, it feels like it's there for a while. I mean, Jelly's Living Art was there for 10 years. I think it went down in 2019. We opened Island Life in 2019, so it was there for, I guess, 9 years because we would have not gone down.
Yeah.
We haven't really talked about timescales, but I mean, this work doesn't just happen overnight. You're talking months of actual construction and months before that of concepting. So at what point are you sitting around the table? When did we start talking about the gallery refresh that shall not be named for Boneless Beauties? When did that discussion start?
2 years ago?
Yeah, 2 years ago.
2 years ago when the concept was presented. And so then we've been working on, telling the story. What's the story we want to tell? And then we kind of flesh out, what could our species be? What kind of animals do we want to showcase?
Can you keep those animals?
Yeah.
What do you need to keep them? Do we have the square footage to allot for tanks big enough to keep those animals and have enough exhibits? That's where his work comes in a lot.
Yeah. So I guess, Jeff, you would enter the process a little bit later, right? Because it has to get husbandry approval first before we move forward with exhibit design, or does it kind of go back and forth?
Yeah, no, he's involved early on because it all comes through the exhibit steering committee.
Yeah.
So he's involved early on, but as far as actually developing it into an exhibit, that begins a little bit later.
Right.
But he's already been involved. I mean, because now keep in mind, right? Jeff's department for exhibits, the husbandry department, and maintenance all have to work together seamlessly to make this happen. But we also need to make something that marketing can do something with and education can do something, right? So it really has tentacles that goes out through the organization. So he and his new position will help facilitate some of this. He's the one responsible to make sure that these concepts are getting spread out. People are reviewing them. Ideas are coming together. And yeah, sure, I can decide, hey, we can't keep elephants at the Tennessee Aquarium, and that might shut that down. But, barring something extreme like that, none of us work in a vacuum. It's the most interlaced, cohesive group of people I've ever worked with in my life.
It really is. And I think that's one of the things I like about working here, too, is that things that I never would have thought that I would have involvement in as a communications specialist, suddenly I'm looped into conversations I never would have thought that I would have been brought into prior to getting this job.
Yeah.
We pulled together a team from marketing, conservation, education, husbandry, visitor services has a seat at the table, exhibits, maintenance, development. Everybody, it takes everybody to pull something like this off.
Yeah, because ultimately it all boils down to the animal's experience and the visitor's experience, right?
Yeah.
Like it all kind of orbits around those two concepts.
Yeah. And then I guess further out orbit is we need it to be successful, right? We can't put together an exhibit of concrete blocks and expect that to help drive attendance, right? So it's got to be successful from the aquarium standpoint and help drive attendance and make people want to come here, because that's the whole point, getting people through the doors and hoping they pick up our message and they go out and affect change.
So, Tom, we talked about the thing that's important to Jeff when it comes to exhibit design, which is that he wants it to sort of tell a story in terms of that being an effective way to pass that message on. What do you think that we do? And I don't want you to necessarily point to any one zoo or aquarium and make a comparison or contrast us with another institution, but what do we do well when it comes to our exhibits?
Yeah, and Jeff is all about telling that story, and he also is very focused on the guest experience. And somehow early in a former career, in my first life, I became enamored with guest experience, and I've carried that with me all these years. So he and I work really synergistically. We work really well together. So to answer your question, I think what we do really, really well is we create an experience that is super fun. We don't beat you over the head, but you get an idea of, hey, maybe it's better if I don't use plastic bags, or maybe it's better if I put my waste or my recycling where it belongs. I think we communicate a message about what's important. I think we communicate an incredible message about what you're looking at, the animals. I think the level of education and fun experience you get wrapped up into one at the Tennessee Aquarium is better than 99.9% of other places. And I think it's because we've adopted this feeling of, bigger isn't better, better is better, and let's just do everything we can to the best of our ability and make the guest experience the best it can be.
If we can I always think if I can make people just forget about the troubles of this world and just spend some time with their family, making memories, seeing some really cool animals, and learning about, the earth and the importance of clean water and how it affects everybody, especially the animals that depend on it to survive, then we win.
Absolutely.
Especially on days like this when it's just so miserable to be outside. Those immersion galleries that we've got, our living forest galleries over at the aquarium, the Delta Country, the Appalachian Cove Forest, and Tropical Cove are all really great at just making you feel surrounded and immersed in an environment in a way that I don't know that I've experienced at many other places, many other zoos or aquariums. And being able to just go on a day like this and just feel like you're walking around the bayou or through my personal happy place up in the Smoky Mountains, it's a really special thing. And I think it's a real credit to us as an institution, but really to the two of you at the table, that you can have that experience and know that so much consideration has gone into making sure that the animals you're seeing are not only visible to you, but they're also living an incredible life with an incredible standard of care, and you can feel good about enjoying that experience and seeing them.
Absolutely.
All right, before I wrap this up, I did want to ask, what is your favorite exhibit?
Wow. Well, we did that YouTube thing, and I told you my favorite exhibit was our new poison dart frog exhibit, and I still think it's pretty spectacular. It's a smaller exhibit compared to many of ours, but you can hear the poison dart frogs chirping from outside the exhibit, and it just makes me feel really good that they are so happy in their space that they are making their audible chirps or whatever a frog does. What does a frog do, Tom?
Chirp.
Ribbit?
Ribbit.
I guess.
Yeah, but
ribbit. They call.
Yeah, they call.
Yeah, and I just think it's fantastic. And you can see them, and if you stop and you listen, you can hear them as well.
So those guys are in the seasonal floodwaters exhibit at the entrance to the Rivers of the World Gallery. So if you want to see them there in the River Journey building. Tom, what is your favorite exhibit?
I have elements of a lot of different exhibits that I really appreciate. But I think right now, and if you ask me this in a year, it may be different. And a year or 2 years ago, it was definitely different. Right now, I think it's the big stream in Ridges to Rivers. There was a lot of work. That was the first exhibit we've ever done where we had the time to actually do R&D and build it ahead of time off-site, mock it up, and test it. And, of course, our audience is listening and can't see the exhibit, but what it is, it's about 22, 23 feet long Appalachian stream, and the water rushes through it just like it does in a real Appalachian stream. The amount of work that went into making that happen was huge. And this started during the pandemic, and we had the extra time because of the pandemic. And we took that extra year and we built it one-on-one. Jeff built his model based on our testing and our measurements. His model was used as a construction document. The exhibit opened in March of 23, and exactly right at 1 year later, everything in the stream started breeding. And we got this incredible spawning event, multi-species spawning event on the nest of the river chub, just like it happens in the wild. And until that time, I don't believe it had ever happened anywhere in captivity.
Unprecedented, yeah.
Unprecedented. And I am just incredibly proud of that because I didn't do that. Our staff did that. Our staff worked together. Our curator of fishes, Matt Hamilton, Ben Stanger, senior aquarist, Avery Millard, who was...
She was an Aquarist 2 at the time. She's a senior Aquarist now.
I think she was Aquarist 2 at the time, right? Now she's senior. And they all worked together along with our maintenance department and Jeff and his guys, and they took a concept, they developed it into a functioning stream, and we know it really functions because the fish act like they're still in nature. So that right now is the thing I'm most proud of, is how we saw that through and then saw the results.
And if you haven't seen a rainbow shiner in full color, they are amazing.
They look fake.
They
Yeah.
do. You should come down to the aquarium and check it out,
Yeah.
because not just the rainbow shiners, but the war paints,
Everything
the
in there. The
chubs,
saffrons are beautiful.
Oh my gosh!
Tennessee days.
And
Yeah.
if
Tennessee
you're
Shiner.
here and they're not doing it, thanks to Jeff, there's a little graphic panel with a monitor showing the spawning event that you, Casey, filmed right in our exhibit.
Yeah, and we do go into great detail about that, just focusing in really closely on that one exhibit in one of the earlier episodes of the show, and I will link to that previous episode, really talking in depth with Ben and with Avery about all of the things that you just talked about. Because what we're talking about today is really a broader strategic, philosophical level view of exhibit design. That one episode is if you really want to drill down into it and see the sausage making process from start to finish, that is the episode that you want to listen to after this one. For my sake, I was going to say that too, but I'll say for sentimental reasons, the Appalachian Cove Forest in its entirety will always have a special place for me, and for probably at least 10 million people, it was literally the first exhibit that you saw when you visited the aquarium. It was the introduction you had to who we are and what we do. And I think for that reason, it'll never not be important and never not be something that I think back on very fondly. I love to walk through it today. If I have to choose another one, I would say through the project that we talked about, that Tiny Wild project I mentioned earlier, Jeff, that you did the frogs for, I had never really stopped to appreciate flooded Amazon until I was doing one of those videos for someone else about something that they liked in that exhibit. I think it was a silver arowana, which is one of my favorite freshwater fishes. And that exhibit is just, I think it's overlooked. It's at the very end of the ramp as you're leaving the building. I think people are, by that point, they've seen so much, they're like sensory overload. They're ready to move on to Ocean Journey. And I feel like they just walk past and they shouldn't. So that's one I would definitely recommend if you're going to take a time and pause at all at any point in your trip for a special stop and look. That's the one to do it at. Because it's a much bigger exhibit than is usual for that building, with the exception of like River Giants or Tennessee River Gallery. And it's a really special thing they've got, and it's got ripsaw catfish, which I think that's like the most metal fish name ever. All right, well, we covered a lot of ground, so I will go ahead and end this episode here by saying thank you very much to Jeff Worley and to Thom Demas. Thank you for joining us for another episode, Tom, and for making your first appearance, Jeff.
Thank you for having me.
It's a lot of fun as always.
All right, and if you have an idea for another episode of the Podcast Aquatic, a future episode, send that to me at podcast@tnaqua.org. While you're online, make sure that you leave us a review or a rating if you don't have the time to write a full review. Both of those are free ways that you can support the show, and they certainly help us out a lot with the algorithm. And in the meantime, until next time, remember that every drop matters.